This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant.
Well, the Rangers did make it interesting in September into the last week and a half, and they've now been officially eliminated with 5 games to go in the regular season, and now it's time to look ahead to 2026.
Yeah, Houston and Seattle just kind of pulled away. You know, the Mariners have played great baseball in September, and I think when the Rangers went to Houston and just got punched in the face, I think it took some air out of their sails, and they have not responded well.
So the Rangers could still figure in this race, though, Evan. They've finished the season with 3 games against those miraculous Cleveland Guardians, who have now come back from 15 and a half games behind in the American League Central. We've seen some epic collapses. We'll see what happens here over the final weekend to see if the Tigers hold on in the division. But it's the Rangers are going to figure in what happens, it looks like, in those final spots for the American League playoffs.
This is the most miraculous comeback by a Cleveland team that did not feature Charlie Sheen as the closer. So it's quite a comeback for the Guardians, and to think that they've done it without 2 key arms in the bullpen and all this, it's really an amazing story. The Rangers will finish up there. The Guardians now have control of the Central. And as we sit here today, we're recording this on Wednesday as we put the Ranger season to bed. But at this moment now, you might as well put the Astros into that group of collapsing teams because they're on the outside of the playoffs looking in at this very moment.
Then it may come down to some of these tiebreakers, and the Astros don't have a lot to hold their hat on there with the tiebreaker situation. But our guest this week is going to be former Ranger Colby Lewis, who was a big part of those several postseason teams for the Rangers, and now is a special assistant. And talked to him a little bit about pitching and the development of pitching, and also some of the guys that he's seen in the minor leagues this year. And arguably, over a long time, the best postseason pitcher in club history.
And then, John, I know you're going to do the archives in Arlington, which for this week we're going to rename Artifacts from an Artifact.
Yep, that's a good one. And we're going to kind of look at starting pitching rotations through Rangers history. And this one has obviously, in 2025, been an excellent one. And how does that compare to some of the teams that have come before us that featured some guys that are in the National Baseball Hall of Fame?
All right, before we get started, this is the time where we remind you can reach out to both of us on X. He's at Ranger Blake, and I'm at Evan_P_Grant. I'm still waiting for my first response of the year. So we'd love to hear from you.
Bottom of the 9th, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
And so as we talk here at episode 20, and again, it's been the first 19 episodes we taped, the Rangers were still in contention. But it has been a really bizarre season. During this losing streak here at the end of the season, it's still kind of been the same, Evan. The Rangers have lost all of these games by 3 or fewer runs. They've given up more than 4 runs just once. And the defense has had a few cracks in it, but it all comes down to no production offensively.
Yeah, and at least right now it's kind of explainable, right? You've got all those young kids playing, and look, I think everybody thought that some of what they did, particularly with Michael Hellman early, was just kind of a nice hot streak, but didn't think it was going to be something that was sustainable. Certainly it's interesting, John, that the Rangers got Odolis Garcia back at the end of that 6-game winning streak in New York, and immediately started what is at this moment an 8-game losing streak. I don't think Adolis has had a ton to do with that, but it's certainly coincidental, and you wonder if there was some mojo disturbed.
Mo ho ho.
Ho ho ho. Some mojo disturbed by that return. And look, I think what really changed the mojo is they had that walk-off loss in New York where I think they had multiple chances to get a run home from third base with less than 2 outs and didn't. They went to Houston and then just got punched in the face. And I think at that point in time, this team realized it was over for all intents and purposes. And they've come home, and as we tape this, they've lost 4 more games to teams with losing records, and a Minnesota team on Tuesday night that, traded away half of its roster at the deadline. And I look at the 8-game losing streak. I think I had this in a column this week. The Rangers were hitting 205 in that 8-game, hitting 204 in that 8-game hitting streak, 8-game losing streak, and they were averaging, less than 3 runs a game. And there's just no offense there. It's been the story of the season. It's going to be the story of the offseason, because I do think that there are going to be some changes to how this offense is approached and to what the focus is going to be.
So it was interesting after the game on Tuesday night, Bruce Bochy kind of mentioned, and I don't think he used the word energy. I think he kind of worked around it.
He never used the word effort or energy.
Right.
He did use the words intensity and focus, and I've never heard him use those words. I called it their worst game of the year, which in a lot of ways it was. It just did not look like they were into the game. It looked like from 30,000 feet in the John Blake press box above the field that this was a team that was going through the motions. And, they were missing a lot of guys, and Wyatt Langford went out again in the 4th inning, and I suspect he's probably going to be done for the year. But I thought what Boch said needed to be said, and he doesn't use those words lightly. And he's, I've heard from people on social media, well, why didn't he say this earlier? And look, I think, sometimes it matters more when you don't say it. And he's waited as long as he possibly could, and I think he's seen a team that he feels like is not into the games properly at this moment.
And you look at the Marlins and the Twins. In the last 4 games, the Rangers have allowed 14 stolen bases. They've missed some plays. And again, I agree with you. I think the lack of your stars, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, guys that have been out, is starting to catch up with this group. I mean, there's a reason, these guys that were doing well over that stretch, didn't have a major league track record. But let's talk about just a little bit. You mentioned this a little earlier. And pitching, I don't, but how do you evaluate if you're Chris Young and everything, and you're looking back and you have your 12, 13 offensive players that were your nucleus this year? How do you evaluate that going forward? You can't replace all these guys. So
no.
How do you even begin to look at, Berger and Josh Young and, all these guys that really did not perform offensively all year?
No, I think if you take the offensive side of the baseball and you take Corey Seager and you take Wyatt Langford out of the mix, everybody that had any element of major league experience regressed. That's just an ungodly number. I sit here and I look today as we're taping this, and there are 7 players with 200 or more plate appearances on this team that have less than a 300 on base percentage. Wholly unacceptable. This team doesn't take walks. Jake Berger has 90 strikeouts and 12 walks. Josh Young has a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk rate. These are just unacceptable numbers. And I think these are things that need to be said in exit interviews with these guys. Is either you're going to make adjustments and you're going to figure out a way to contribute when you're not red hot at the plate, or you're not going to be guaranteed playing time. And I think that's the only way to proceed at this point.
It's going to be interesting to see how Christian, again, most of his bullpen is going to be free agents, so you're going to have to remake that. I think you can, and again, we'll talk about this over the offseason. Your starting pitching looks pretty solid for next year, but that offense, again, where do you find the help? Is it other guys, the minors? Is Sebastian Wolcott an answer? I mean, who knows, right? I mean, but it's been so puzzling this year.
I think the Rangers are going to have to go out and in this offseason get a position player who has, for lack of a better term, presence is going to be the right word. Corey Seager is a performer. Marcus Semien is a performer. They go about their jobs entirely differently, or how they prepare for it. I think they need somebody in that clubhouse that is, for lack of a better term, a uniter, a guy who brings everybody together and who can kind of take on the role of quote unquote team leader. That's a very vague title, but I think that's something you need. You look around the free agent pool, and I see guys out there who potentially have that ability. They're going to be expensive. Kyle Schwarber would be very expensive, and you run into the question of how do you exactly move Kyle Schwarber into the lineup, because you've got a DH making a lot of money. Alex Bregman certainly has that reputation. He's a third baseman. That obviously would put Josh Young in some jeopardy. JT Realmuto is a guy who, his performance has gone down a little bit, but as a catcher, he's got a real performance and a real presence and a real track record. So I'll be interested to see how the Rangers look at guys like that, because I think that's a necessity at this point.
And the other thing, and again, we sitting here today, we have no idea how this is going to play out. Bruce Bochy's contract has expired here after 3 years, and we'll see what happens with that here over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and all I can go on is this, but Boch has said he wants to continue to manage, and he still loves it. There have been times this year where he's looked a little bit tired and a little bit worn down, but I also think that he's still very much engaged, and it's hard for me to see this team letting a guy who took them to their first World Series and who is a Hall of Fame manager walk away. But with all of that said, John, they've also got a great managerial prospect on hand in Skip Schumacher. So it's going to be an interesting decision for Chris Young. It's an interesting decision for Bruce Bochy if this season, when he sits back and considers it, if it has finally worn him out. But yeah, the Rangers have a very busy offseason ahead of them, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah, and then as we stand here, I still think, and we mentioned that last week, that getting a winning record, and as we speak, they got to win. They got to go 3-2, and they still got to go to Cleveland. But that to me is a big optic as you enter any offseason.
You and I have talked about this, and you and I are both old souls on this, and I know that in this day and age, it only matters whether or not you made the postseason or not. But for me, 82 wins or better represents if not a successful season, it certainly represents that this was a team that won more than it's lost, and that's what you asked for from your teams.
So our guest this week is Colby Lewis, as we said, probably the most successful postseason pitcher over multiple postseasons. Nathan Eovaldi's 2023 postseason was one for the books. And we'll get Colby's thoughts on this year's Rangers team and some of the young pitchers that he's seen in his role as special assistant, and we'll talk to him next. We're happy to have as our guest today on Sports Day Rangers, Colby Lewis. Pitched 11 years in the major leagues, of course. Rangers stalwart from the 2010-11 World Series teams, and then pitched again with the club when they went to the playoffs in 2016. It was the Rangers' first overall pick in 1999, and 4-1 overall in the postseason. Now he's special assistant to Chris Young. So, Colby, thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on.
Well, I usually start with a history question, and then we'll talk about, your role and everything.
As you should.
Right. Well, I want to go back to 2002, your first year in the big leagues. When to say that the 2002 Rangers were dysfunctional might be generous. It was Jerry Naren's only full year as manager. We started the year with Oscar Acosta as our pitching coach, and you pitched well in spring training. Jerry, I remember, fought for you to make the club coming out of spring, and you made the opening day roster, never having pitched above Double-A. What were your memories of as a young pitcher coming up in that situation?
Well, I think I was kind of naive, actually. It was my first big league camp, and you go in there, and then it's just all these veteran guys, and I feel like we signed every veteran guy that we could possibly find, but
especially in the bullpen.
It was, for me, it was overwhelming. I was just 22 years old, not pitched in AAA, not done much, but and just felt like when I had an opportunity, I'd go out there and just John, back then, I threw real hard. So my fastball played and my big curveball at the time. I think one of the main reasons why I wound up making that club is it was in Tampa, towards the end of spring, and I think I threw the starter came out early. Forget who started that game, and I came in relief, and I pitched 4 innings, didn't give up any runs, and punched out a bunch of guys, and that was right towards the end of spring training, and I remember telling myself, I might have a chance to make this club. But then I thought, I was well, I hadn't pitched in AAA. They'll probably send me down, see how I'm going to do. And then, we have those opening games back at the ballpark, preseason, right before the season starts. And my dad and my uncle were driving my truck out. And I pitched in another game against Seattle, and pitched really well, 1 inning. And I remember going to Oscar at the time, and I was like, hey, I need to tell my dad where to go, to go to Oklahoma City, take my truck to Oklahoma City, or come to Arlington or whatever. And he's like, all right, give me a couple minutes. So comes back, he says, hey, Jerry wants to see you. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna find out real quick what's happening, and told me I'd made the ball club, and called my mom, and starts crying and all that good stuff. So it was pretty awesome. Of course, I think I get sent down 3 weeks later because I wasn't pitching. So just being young, they wanted to get innings under me, and I understood that. But yeah, it was a different year because they sent me down. They said, hey, you're a starter. We want you to be a starter. And so I go down there in AAA, pitch well, starting, and then call me back up. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start. Nope, right back to the bullpen. So, and then I think I was up for about a month, and I pitched 2 times in a month. I didn't pitch very much at all. And so they're like, hey, we need you to go back down, keep getting innings, and we'll call you back up in September. And that's what happened. And I get called back up for September, and I get some starts in September. So,
that, and when you were around, it was so kind of disjointed for how much time you were around, and you're a rookie. So you're just kind of observing and doing whatever you're told. But look, you've been,
absolutely,
you saw probably the most dysfunctional Rangers rosters that I've been around, and you saw, for me, the 2 best Ranger rosters that I've been around in 10 and 11. How do you differentiate between, or how important, Colby, is chemistry and a team pulling together in optimizing your opportunity for success?
I think it's huge, right? I think it's I'm kind of learning it. I'm not really learning it, but I see it kind of happening with my daughter in volleyball right now, and how all the girls are having fun, and the unity is really good, and these girls are playing well, and I think it's like anything else, right? It's like a family atmosphere. If you have everybody kind of bouncing off each other, having ideas, talking to each other after plays, doing all that kind of stuff, it just kind of helps each other hold each other accountable. I think being a part of in those older teams, there's so many single voices, and they kind of just want one thing out of themselves, and they just kind of, they don't know where they're going to be at next year, or this kind of thing or that, so it gets kind of individualized, and so yeah, it doesn't make for a good unity. I think I always told myself, no matter where I played at or where I was at, you try to get to know the guys the best you can, spend time with them, be around them, because everybody goes through different things, and you don't know what's bothering, I think that's what kind of my role, I feel like talking with these young guys are, you don't know what kind of background they come from. It's kind of learning each guy's personality, and see how you can kind of fit in and relate to them, and so I think that's the biggest thing about a team is just trying to relate to each guy, so I think that's the biggest, like I said, that will help impact, you guys off the field and on the field.
Well, by the time you got back to the club in 2010 and 2011 from Japan, you kind of became that guy. You kind of became the de facto guy there. I mean, you didn't have a ton of big league experience at that point in time, but very quickly, I think the staff followed you. And I know you've been more around the minor leagues the last couple of years, but a recurring theme here is Nathan Eovaldi's impact on this pitching staff. And I'm just curious, like, what you've observed about Nathan and what you think of his impact as it relates to how well this pitching staff has pitched this year.
Well, I think it's huge, right? I mean, especially, you're going to go, you guys know, I went through my share of injuries, and it sucks. And I think that's the biggest thing, that whether you're healthy or not, you're constantly talking with guys and constantly relating to them, talking to them about pitching. CJ Wilson was a guy that loved to dissect everything, and I felt like I learned a lot from him in a lot of aspects. It's not the way I pitched, but but I learned different approaches and how he thought about the game and how he thought about going about hitters, and it's like talking with these young guys, and I tell them, out of the chute, you can let it go in one ear and out the other, but if you like one thing, then pick it out and then try to incorporate it. If not, then if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, and I think that's what the big thing is what Eovaldi does, is that, not only leads by example when he goes out there on the mound, and, he's still kind of got that old school mentality. Like, when I take the ball, I'm going 9 innings, and, that's the way I felt, and then I remember CJ telling me at one point, I threw a complete game. He goes, and he goes, well, I'm going 9 again. I'm going 9 tomorrow. I'm like, yes, let's go, and that's the type of, motivation and pushing of each other, that, a good staff does. Like, if you go out there as a reliever, that guy throws a scoreless inning, boom, it's your job. That's next time, it's your job. Like, you got the 7th, I got the 8th, let's go. So I think that a lot of those guys are seeing that, and he's doing that by example for sure.
You talked about, you mentioned adversity, and you certainly went through your share of adversity. You got released or waived 4 or 5 times between 2005 and 2008. You go to Japan for a couple of years, and then the injuries, coming back from several injuries, the hip resurfacing and all of that. Now that you instruct young pitchers and everything, and how do your experiences with all this adversity kind of help? Because I think young guys sometimes think this could be a cakewalk, and there's a lot of ways that it's really not.
Yeah, I think, I got to talk a little bit with Mark Church, so Churchy's down, and he was kind of down in the dumps a little bit, but it's kind of one of those things. I always call it a speed bump, It's just a part that we push our bodies so much that eventually it's something, you hope it lasts a long time before it breaks. But some guys, they break and then come back, that I was one of those guys. But I think the biggest thing is just show up every day, like there's going to be days that are really, really hard, and you don't want to go to the ballpark, and you don't want to do the same things, all your exercise and all that kind of stuff. It's boring and it gets monotonous, and you just kind of have to, push that aside on your bad days, and then your good days you take advantage of, and you kind of try to take that same mindset into every day. And then, eventually months go by and you're back healthy and back to doing the, what you love to be, what you love to do is being on the field.
So Colby, you are working with minor league pitchers. You're a special assistant on the pitching side. We had another one of the special assistants on the pitching side, your running buddy, Darren Oliver, earlier.
My boy, Dio.
You two are a regular comedy act in spring training when I'm around the two of you. But
Yeah, what do they call us, frickin' frack or something?
Something like that. Maybe it might be another word or two in there. But listen, I asked Darren this we had him on probably in June. Who did you see in the system this year that really stuck out to you, and what do you think about the overall health of the pitching system right now?
It's good. I think, there's differences on, well, like I got to go in the lab, and I hadn't been in the lab in a while, and there in Surprise, and it was absolutely amazing. Like I feel like, these younger guys have so much, I don't know, mechanical stuff and everything else to be able to, like if you can't get better, I think it's your fault. Like there's so much to see, but yet, like I said, you take the spots that you feel like that are going to make you better, and then move forward with that. But it's wild to me, like the amount of information that these guys have now, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these guys throw a lot harder. Because they're be able to, say, well, your hips aren't here, and your arm angle's in this way, and they're really transitioning these guys to get absolutely the most and the best they can out of everybody's body. But yeah, there's some of the younger guys. I got to see a couple of our younger draftees, like Evan Siri, AJ Russell, those guys, a little bit, college guys. Both the guys have a really good understanding on pitching, because they got to pitch in basically the SEC and pitch against higher talented, batters and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Scarborough's, one of those guys has had another good year. So he's on the younger side too. What is he? I think he's 19 or 20, something like that.
Caden Scarborough, I think he pitched at 19 this year. For the listeners out there who aren't aware, very tall, lanky, skinny kid from Central Florida, and from that description, you might think I'm talking about Jacob deGrom, but he's a guy who in the system has gotten a whole lot of praise all year.
Right. Yeah, which is the understanding of being that young and being able to throw 4 pitches right now at that age, and having an understanding of the strike zone. I think that's my biggest thing is for a lot of these younger guys. I with Mike Maddox kind of being, is one of my mentors. I take a lot of like his different stuff, and feed it kind of back to these guys. Especially these younger guys that want to go out and just try to throw 100 and wind up having 5 or 6 pitches, 7 pitches per guy. The old school mentality, 3 pitches or less, 0 counts, where does a big leaguer hit, like in all of Major League Baseball, like, and they're like, well, he's got to be hitting like 250 or whatever. I'm like, no, it's like 060 in all baseball, like, so, go out there and steal strike one, like it's trying to get them to simplify it a little bit more, because they do have so much knowledge and so much of all the, it's just the computers. I mean, it's just all the stuff, the TrackMans and everything else, it's just, you find some of these young kids that they'll throw 1 pitch in the bullpen and turn around and be like, well, what was the vert on this? And what was that? I'm like, get into a rhythm, stand over the mound and throw me 3 straight strikes. I don't care what that thing says. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's trying to get them to understand, like, when they go on the field, they can't be thinking about, oh man, I'm when I go back and look at that, I got to look at that pitch because that thing was nasty. Like, did you get the guy out or not? That's what I want to know. So like, that's the thing is trying to get them to understand the game in their way, but simplify it in the best way that makes them good when they're, attacking guys.
Oh, and a young guy like you mentioned competing, like, I'm sure you've had a chance to watch Jack Leiter this year. Rangers have not had a great track record of developing young starting pitching. What has been your, as Leiter is now making this full adjustment, as you talk about everything he's gotten in the minor leagues development and making that adjustment now to being, full-time, every 5-day starting pitcher. What
Yeah,
have you seen in Leiter?
I think that exactly what we were just kind of talking about. I think younger, he was probably trying to do too much too early because of, who he was and how hard he threw and, how good his stuff was. I think he was just trying to be a little bit too fine, and that's what created a lot of the walks. I think now he's gotten to the point where, like, my fastball plays if it's middle away, so I think that's what you're seeing now is that he's really learned how to attack and stay on the attack and not pitch from behind in a lot of counts, so I think that's the biggest key, because all of his stuff's been there the last couple of years. We've all seen it, and I think it's just the mentality now of, like, you're not going to beat me now. Like, I'm not going to beat myself, basically.
It's just to go back to what you said. I mean, it's throwing more strikes. What he didn't do last year and what he didn't do in the minors was throw strikes. And he has, I think, and to go back even further with what you were saying, he has some of that CJ Wilson element in him where he overanalyzes everything. And Jack knows it. And he comes from a pitching family and he wants to be a perfectionist. But you also have to go through it in the big leagues and learn, okay, I just have to throw a strike. It doesn't have to be a perfect strike sometimes.
Right. And I did that. I mean, I'm being young, especially my second year, being up basically all year in 03. I mean, I had a 7 ERA, but I'd go out there and walk a ton of guys and then have a great game. It's one of those things that it's a process. It's a learning process for, a lot of young guys. And when you get it and you have dynamic stuff like him, I mean, as long as he stays healthy, I mean, he's the front end starter. He's a 1, 2, 3 guy. I mean, that's where, the potential is. And I think we're starting to see that now.
Colby, we appreciate it. Before we let you go, though, I wanted to just get your thoughts about a devastating loss to the organization last week in Scott Littlefield. You would have had a chance to interact with Litt as a player since he's been here for so long, and then now in the last, 6, 7, 8 years in your role now. And what are your memories of Litt?
I love Litt. I mean, I remember coming to the clubhouse, and he always he always had a way of making you smile and having a joke or making you laugh. And like me and Dio, like it was like he'd always gravitate and pick our brains but it was completely shocking to me when I heard. And it was definitely a devastating loss. But yeah, Litt was one of those guys. Like, even I didn't even know when he'd show up. He'd be in Arizona, he'd come here, he'd come there. Like, he was one of the parts of the organization that is going to be truly, truly missed. I mean, just with his knowledge and his expertise on pretty much everything. So everything baseball. So it's going to be, I feel very sorry for his family. It's definitely, a tragic loss for our organization. But I love Litt. He was one of those guys that I always look forward to talking to him, for sure.
Colby, I'm going to tell you that was very well said, but it's also not in any way unique to what I've heard from people in the organization over the last 4 days. The things that stood out about Scott Littlefield were his sense of humor, his ability to be blunt, his ability to both be blunt and then disarm whoever he was talking to with a sense of humor, and just his absolute love of the game. And I know you were one of his favorites as a player because he loved guys who loved to compete. And, one thing Michael Young told me when we were talking about it was the first thing that Litt would always say is, this guy loves to play, or this guy doesn't love to play. And that was the biggest compliment he could give a guy, was that this guy loves to play. And, I know that the last 3 days that he spent in Houston, we were around when he was around, and I know it meant a lot to him. But it is, from this reporter's standpoint, it is a devastating loss for the organization. And it's one of those times where, guys who aren't in the limelight very much as scouts, I'm glad I got a little bit of a chance to tell his story, because people need to know how important he was to what this organization stands for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before we let you go, I'm just going to say this, Colby. You also deserve a very high round of applause. I think you have come back every year for Do It for Durrett. And
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't miss that. Richard was one of those special guys, definitely in the clubhouse. You know, he always talked to you straight and gave you a straight answer, and it's easy. You know, it was one of those easy things, kind of like Jeff Wilson and Anthony Andro when we had him in there. You know, those guys are few and far to come by. You know, like when well, even yourself, Evan. So.
you, it's a real testament to the person that you are.
When you're not coming back for the 7th time, asking me the same question. You were real good. You were real good. You were real good about everybody asking questions, and you get your one little question, and then everybody leaves, and then here comes Evan right back.
Yeah, that was the circle back. That's my move, is the circle back.
The circle back.
Oh,
And I'd have to be yelling to shoo him out of the clubhouse. It's time to go, Evan. Time to go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
looking for that last story.
We appreciate Colby. I'm sure we'll see you soon, and thanks for doing this today.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on.
thanks, Colby.
Thanks a lot for Colby Lewis for that great conversation. One of the best guys to ever pitch here, and I know Evan agrees with me that we both rooted for Colby every time he came back from one of those injuries. It was amazing. And like you said, Evan, you were right. In 2010, even though he was just coming back from Japan, he kind of took that role and led that pitching staff.
Everybody gelled around him.
You know, he was amazing. So speaking of pitching, for our final regular season archives in Arlington, we wanted to look at kind of, the Rangers have had historical pitching this year, and trying to compare Rangers staffs of the past, it's hard. And it's hard to take ERAs because with runs, different league averages every year. But Evan, I'm going to give you a couple, and you can weigh in on what you think were the best starting staffs. This one, obviously, very, very good when they were all healthy, with Nathan Eovaldi and Jacob deGrom and Tyler Mahle and Patrick Corbin. It was, and Jack Leiter. It's been a really strong staff that in a lot of years we would have begged for this with the offense. So the current team starters ERA, and just using this as a baseline of 3.41 would be the third lowest in team history. And again, I'm just using the top two would be in 1976, 3.21. Two Hall of Famers on that staff, Bert Blyleven, Gaylord Perry, and then to go along with Nelson Briles and Jim Umbarger. 1983, the team ERA was 3.34. Rick Honeycutt was unbelievable. He had a 2.4 ERA to go along with Charlie Huff and Danny Darwin and Mike Smithson. Neither one of those teams had a winning record. The 83 Rangers were actually in first place at the All-Star break, and Chicago blew them out in the second half. So I'm going to take two staffs, and the kind of the criteria I used, and maybe it's not fair, is just how consistent they were. 1996, when Ken Hill won 16 games and Bobby Witt won 16, Roger Pavlik, Darren Oliver, and then the Kevin Gross, John Burkett combination, which runs 16 games. They started 160 out of 163 games, that group, and won 75 games in the first year the Rangers went to the postseason. Their composite ERA as starters were 4.79, but again, it was a much different era. And then 2011, kind of the same thing, group that started 157 of the 162 games and recorded 74 wins. Derek Holland, C.J. Wilson, Matt Harrison, the aforementioned Colby Lewis, and Alexis Ogando, 3.65 composite ERA, and obviously that team won the American League pennant. So those are what would be your kind of if you were looking at great staffs.
Well, I wrote down 4 here, and without looking at any numbers. 96 was the first one on my list. I put down the 10 and 11 staffs, and obviously the 11 staff with the addition of Ogando moving from the bullpen into the rotation, then back to the bullpen for the postseason, were the first 2 on my list. You know, there was that point in time when this team had Kevin Brown, Kenny Rogers. That was neither guy had completely hit their stride, but those were 2 as talented homegrown pitchers as the Rangers have ever had. I don't know that those staffs were quite as good as they would have liked. And then the 74 group, I mean, just has to stand out for me because of what Bibby and Fergie Jenkins did that year. So those were the 4 that stuck out for me. Look, the more I've got a Cy Young vote this year, and for me, the 3 most important numbers are ERA, innings pitched, and a strikeout to walk rate. And ever since 96, and I obviously wasn't here in 96, I came in 97, but I know what that staff did, and I know Doug Melvin talked about that staff so much, and the idea that you got so many innings and had so much stability from a starting rotation, that was really the model that the Rangers tried to operate by for 20 years.
And it was also where they were on pace for that a lot this year until, you know, the injuries started hitting here, and Malley, I guess, went down, was the first one.
Yeah.
But, you know, for a while there, that was kind of the model, and the success of those 2 teams in 96 and 2011, where those guys took the ball pretty much every 5th day. You know, Johnny Oates and then Ron Washington knew, but his starter stayed healthy.
You knew your starter was going to give you 6 innings. It allowed you to set up bullpen roles much more to your advantage. It allowed for it just allowed you to plan out series much more to your advantage. And look, you look at the teams that are going to go deep into the playoffs this year. I think Seattle hasn't used a ton of starting pitchers. And right now they, you know, look to me as good as any team in the American League. So the ability to get innings and stability, and then when you add in performance, obviously, those are huge things for a starting rotation. And I know that on my list, 96 and 11 would definitely be at the top. I really wish that Nathan Eovaldi had been able to stay healthy all year.
Me too.
I would have loved to have seen like just what that would have ended up, because this would have been, in my estimation, and it might still be, but as good a 1-2 combination that the Rangers had at the top of a rotation in club history. And this season may go down as a huge disappointment, but it's been a joy to watch this starting rotation work. It really has. It's been fun to watch these guys pitch every day.
And as we said, who would have thought Jacob deGrom would have made 30 starts this year? And, you know, the last few starts, he's run out of gas a little bit, but still, I mean, you're right. Watching Eovaldi and deGrom this year, it's been a lot of fun. Even for somebody like me in a semi-retired stage, I always make sure I come to the games when those 2 guys are on the mound at Globe Life Field.
Yeah, and you know, just to wrap all of this up, I go back to what we were talking about with Colby. Look, I think the pitching health of this organization is better than maybe it's ever been, certainly since I've been around. And you look at the development of Jack Leiter this year, how far Jacob Latz has come, the idea that Kumar Rocker could take the same kind of steps
Correct.
as Leiter next year. And then look, I wouldn't be surprised if the last weekend of the year, Jose Corniel gets a start in the big leagues. He was the 2023 minor league pitcher of the year, missed all of 24 with Tommy John. Has pitched great since he's come back this year. I think he deserves an opportunity. And so that's just homegrown talent, you know, that does put the Rangers in a much better spot. And we're not even talking about Cody Bradford, who should be back at some point in time,
exactly.
middle of 2026.
Well, we'll have time to dissect the 25 season. Hopefully, if our podcast here continues somewhat in the off season. But anyway, we want to thank you for joining us on Sports Day Rangers, episode number 20. We We made it to 20.
Remember, you can catch Sports Day Insider, my podcast with Kevin Sherrington and a staffer from sports staff every week on the same feed. You can check us out on the socials. We usually post clips from the podcast on Instagram and on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days. And we will be back next week with a final wrap up on the 2025 season, and hopefully have a schedule for you for off-season broadcasts.
So hopefully we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks for listening.